questions. Mr. Chairman, if you're ready, you're cleared to go.
Oh, yeah. There's a connection needed.
Hey, Lindsay. How are you? Good tomorrow? Good afternoon. My name is Chris League. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the August 10th meeting of the City County Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Before we get started with our order of business today, we have a special recognition for Mr. George Bryan, who served faithfully on the planning board for a number of years. And so I have asked our vice chair, Mr. Jason Grubbs, to present the proclamation to Mr. Bryan. After that, if anyone would like to have comments or remarks, the floor is open.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to make my comments before I read the proclamation. George, I just want you to know how much I enjoyed serving on the planning board with you. One of the things that I was always struck by was the thoughtfulness that you brought to every single case we considered. You and I often came at things from opposite ends of the spectrum, but I always appreciated the thoughtfulness you brought to things. And given your level of inquisitiveness, though, I'm going to have to ask you to hold any questions you have about this proclamation. So
I'll wait till the end.
all right, so this is a resolution honoring George Bryan for his service as a member of the City County Planning Board. Whereas the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and the Board of Commissioners of Forsyth County, North Carolina, appointed George Bryan to serve on the City County Planning Board. And whereas George Bryan served the citizens of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County as a member of the City County Planning Board from March 2015 to June 2013. And whereas his experience managing nonprofit organizations in Winston-Salem and as a longtime member of the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance has contributed to his awareness of the impact of planning decisions on community residents. And whereas George Bryan recommended developmental proposals, plans, and policies which improved the livability of this community and resulted in non-residential development being more compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. And whereas George Bryan served as the planning board liaison for the Northwest Winston-Salem area plan update, and whereas he invested time and energy to thoughtfully evaluate each item presented to the planning board for consideration during his tenure, now therefore be it resolved that George Bryan is recognized for his volunteer service to the community through his membership on the City County Planning Board. We extend sincere appreciation to him for that service and wish him health and happiness in his future endeavors. Be it further resolved that this resolution be made a part of the public record and a copy of this resolution be furnished to George Bryan. Adopted this 10th day of August 2023 by Chris Leak, Chair, City County Planning Board. So George, thank you very much. We all appreciate all your time.
George, before you say anything, I'd like to give some thoughts. You know, I will always appreciate your deliberate thoughtfulness that you brought to the planning board. And not only to the planning board, but I remember when I first started working in corporate, you were at the children's home, and I remember hearing your name all the time, George Bryan, George Bryan. And then when I got a chance to meet you, I think everything I heard was true. You're very thoughtful. You come with a lens of making sure that things are fair and equitable, which is something that I always appreciate. You think of those that others may not think of through a different lens, and I think that has served the citizens of Winston-Salem and surrounding communities well. I thank you. You've made me a better planning board member because I knew I had to prepare because you were always going to find a question that no one else thought about. And it always was a challenge that I really appreciated. I thank you so much for what you brought to my life and to the city of Winston-Salem. Anyone else?
I appreciate you, George, for always concentrating on making our neighborhoods great. And of course, that's what makes a city great. But also other things too, interest in affordable housing or increased housing stock, concern about tax base protection from invasion of non-tax-paying users, institutional, governmental, and things like that. But what I'm most impressed about is how you managed to make all of our meetings and still stay on the water 300 days a year. Thank you for your service. Really do appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this won't be the first time that I have spoken from another different lens, a different perspective. George, I just want to say for the record that I think you would make the worst poker player on earth. We have always known where you're coming from. You're coming from thorough thoughtfulness, from honesty, from sincerity, and for an unwavering commitment to the neighborhoods of Winston-Salem and this surrounding area, and I thank you for all of that. I will miss that presence. Cheers to you.
I'll just
Put the cards down.
I'll go back to the issue of the asking questions, because I think you ask a lot of questions that everybody needed to hear, that there may have been other people on the board that may have, or the audience that may have known, but a lot more people that didn't. Things like, what's stormwater? Why did we do it this way? Why can't we do this? Well, what about this? And so it brought an element of thoroughness and I guess just respect for everybody there, so they knew as much as possible about why we were making the decisions that we were. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll just echo real quick Brenda's comment. I know I said something earlier, but her comment about stormwater, I think your ability to analyze potential impacts, sometimes maybe that nobody had thought about, to stormwater issues, was really kind of ahead of its time in some ways. I think more and more we're going to be confronted with that in our work on this board. And you certainly helped me as a new board member kind of open my eyes to, hey, there's all kinds of stuff besides just what's in the plan sometimes that could impact this particular development. So.
And I think to piggyback a little bit on that too, like the questions came from listening to people and going to the neighborhoods and kind of seeing where the thermometer is on that. And I think that's something that us as a board have to keep remembering, that it's good we have our own ideas and our own beliefs, but to keep checking back and have that passion that you have to, like, what is it that the community needs? What is it the community wants? And that's something that is very cherished, I think.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just say thank you for your time, your commitment, your inquisitiveness. As someone who previously was a planner, I knew it was always important to prepare, and y'all know, for the questions that the board may have. But I really appreciate that, especially being on this side of the table, and you're not my neighbor anymore, but of course you're still here in the community. So your perspective and also speaking up for people out there in the community is very valuable. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
George, I think we'll have some remarks from you if you don't mind.
Well, I looked at your agenda.
You have 12 minutes.
I'll take all 12. Of course, your agenda is so light today that you really deserve to have a much longer presentation, I'm sure. But, if I can even open up what I have here. I don't think I can even open it up. First of all, thank you. I certainly have enjoyed the 8+ years of being here and getting to know each of you and your perspectives on this. And as some of you know and have expressed, for 17 years prior to coming on the planning board, I served on the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance. And that's the one group that each month reviews the planning issues, UDO changes, and things like that. And there's some 25 neighborhoods that come together with the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance, look at those issues and discuss the ones that affects those neighborhoods, but also when they're looking at UDO changes, things that will affect our county and our city. So each month, I always had another meeting that was talking about the agenda, sometimes as many as 4 or 5 other meetings where I was listening to neighbors and having to suspend my comments because I was on the planning board and waiting till that time. But the other part of it was that I felt a very high obligation to always be familiar with the sites. And I've spent 8+ years of going every month to sites I wasn't familiar with. And it's hard to find a place I'm not familiar with, being a longtime citizen of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. But for the first 5 years, I guess it was with the sign committee, and I was pretty diligent in that. I don't think I missed more than 1 or 2 of those trips. And then following the advent of COVID, going out on my own to visit those. And I remember one time having to drive 70 miles just to see all the different sites that were involved in that, so that I was sure that I could bring that knowledge into it. And then if you see a neighbor standing there, to stop and talk to that neighbor and say, how's this affected? Do you know about this? And just to listen to them and see what they were thinking about it. But the other part of serving on the planning board was connecting the issues for me, because for a long period of time, since the early 90s, I helped establish the child fatality reviews, and Forsyth County, I served on that. I've served on that for that period of time and literally reviewed thousands of child deaths. And what you do in planning affects families' lives. Sidewalks save kids. Dead-end streets into apartment complex are dead ends for families as well. So there are different things that you're doing here each day that really do make an impact on the community health and what's out there. It's also interesting, as I chair the State Advisory Board for Community Child Protection, that this year we survey all 100 counties. And this year, for the first time in over a decade, the issue of affordable housing for truly needy folks came up as a top issue in our state that we will recommend for the state to correct and work on and forward to the feds. And as you know, I don't think that zoning is the end all in terms of how to create affordable housing. But there are other things that we did on the planning board that did make a difference. And particularly I wanted to point out the planning that was done around the Peters Creek corridor, Chris. That to me is one of the best examples in Winston-Salem, an area that has a variety of housing on both sides, has transportation, education, retail, jobs. It's in there, and that variety and ability to make a corridor effective like that is what does bring affordable housing and options to families, and we need to do more of that as we look forward around Winston-Salem and the county. Lastly, I just wanted to say that one of the things that you recognized me for was this Northeast plan. I think the area plans were perhaps the thing for me that it best exemplifies what planning can do. If you remember that era of the board here, what we were able to do was to bring planning issues into the community, into citizens. And they don't deal with that most of the time, but we're going to their neighborhood, talking to them about what zoning is, what the different types of zoning is, what are the difficulties and challenges of this, and then having them talk about that, the meeting the staff so that they knew that there were real people behind these planning decisions. All of that was really exemplified for me, some of the best planning that I have been involved with. And as we look toward this Forward 2045, I hope we can reintegrate that back in and re-engage citizens at that level. So thank you for this opportunity to serve and for the opportunity to be involved with all of this over these most of the decade. Thanks.
Like to stay for the last meeting.
I'll watch you on television.
Okay.
He's not taking.
From what bar?
This would have been a good day to take our picture as well.
Uh-oh.
All right, thank you all for bearing with that. Mr. Braun definitely made a big impact on our board, and we wanted to take that time to recognize him. So thank you for your patience. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There will be no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Under items section B of the agenda, will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the planning board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the requests. Before addressing the planning board today, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the July 13th and July 27th meetings. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. That is unanimous. Thank you. Now I'm going to call on Mr. Brian Wilson to review the consent agenda for us.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Our first item on the consent agenda tonight is item D1, that's PBR 2023-06. They have requested another automatic continuance to the September hearing. They're continuing to work through a challenging site, but hopefully we'll have something for you in September. Next item on the agenda is item C1, that is subdivision number 2023-086. That's the Endwell subdivision. It's an 18-lot preliminary subdivision in an RS9 zoning district. Approximately 5.25 acres in size on the northwestern terminus of Wakeman Drive. You can see it's right below the Beltway. And again, this is the proposed preliminary subdivision showing continuation of the current street stub of Wakeman Drive, proceeding north and then intersecting with a new street that will punch out to Northampton Drive. That's a minor thoroughfare there. The net density is about 3.42 units per acre, which is below the max allowed in RS9, which is 4.84 units per acre. It is considered low density, so no on-site stormwater controls would be required. Just a little tidbit, they are proposing an additional 25-foot access easement. The purpose for that, there's a small triangle of property, and I don't think you can see my pointer, so let me fix that for you. A little triangle of property here that's owned by NCDOT. The purpose of that is to keep it from being landlocked in any way, so that if for some reason NCDOT wanted to divest themselves of that property, that wouldn't be an issue for them. Otherwise, the site plan does meet UDO requirements, and staff recommends approval of this request. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? It's a pleasure of the board.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the next item on your agenda is C2. That's subdivision 2023-087. That's the Riverstone subdivision. It's a 19-lot preliminary subdivision, also in an RS9 zoning district. So this is a much larger site at 33.36 acres located on the west side of Murray Road between Harpwell Drive and Walker Road. It's actually right across the street from Northwest Middle School, just to give you a little more context. Again, it's a proposed 19-lot subdivision. The net density is about 0.5 units per acre, so significantly less than what the maximum allowed is in RS9. The purpose of that is to allow for on-site septic fields. There is some septic available across the street, but the grades do not work out at all. They would have to get a substantial amount of easements from the school system. Further to the west at Mallard Lakes, that's a very significant distance, so that's cost prohibitive. Therefore, they're proposing the on-site septic fields at this location. They are also proposing one stream crossing here, are proposing stub streets to the north and south, meeting the connectivity requirement. The site plan does meet all UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval of this request. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is D2, that's PBR 2023-13. Petition, it's the Above Beyond Adult Daycare Center, which is located in an HB zoning district. It's a 0.4 acre site located on the north side of Coliseum Drive between Georgetown Drive and University Parkway. You can see it's entirely within, surrounded by similarly zoned HB property. So this is a site plan depicting the existing structure on site. They're proposing to reutilize that same structure and the parking. The parking is legally non-conforming, existed before the new parking requirements took place in 1998. So they could potentially be slightly below what would currently be required, but they're certainly, if they need additional parking, they could probably accommodate that with off-site parking agreements. The site plan in and of itself meets UDO requirements, and staff recommends approval of this request. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any discussion from staff? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Groves. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and I apologize, do be patient. If I get really into the numbers on this one, just let me know. This is item D2. It's PBR 2023-14. Petitioners Duarte and Castro LLC. They're requesting a paired parcel average density. It's a paired parcel average density request in the Salem Lake watershed. It's two separate sites. There's a northern parcel where they're going to be increasing the built-upon area. That's the 5.94 acre site. And then there's another southern site off of Hastings Hill Road to the east of that. That's a 2.82 acre site. You could consider that the donor site. And this is the overall proposed.
If I could clarify, this is D3.
Yeah. D3.
Oh, excuse me. I apologize for the typo. Yes, it is item D3. So we'll go ahead with this one if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine. We just noticed that.
So again, this is the site where they're proposing new built-upon area. In this section, there is a large amount of area already included in this kind of a regular area that will also continue to be undeveloped. So just kind of showing you a little bit more. They're coming back to a new request to add this additional built-upon area. It's a new fire truck access point to access the rear of the building, a new sidewalks, a new canopy, and some additional parking. There was a previous request approved in 2020, so this is really in addition to that, to accommodate that. And this is the donor site, the 2.82 acre site. So they will be providing a perpetual conservation easement on that area with the remainder to continue to be developed. The petitioner did work quite a bit with stormwater staff to ensure the calculations were correct. Therefore, the site plan does meet UDO requirements. Staff does recommend approval based on the findings provided in the staff report.
Procedurally, how do you use a deed restriction? How does that work to encumber the borrow site or the?
In order to process any new development, they'll have to record an easement that's dedicated to either, it will most likely be the city of Winston-Salem in this case. And then once that's recorded, it's filed with the state as well.
And as another safeguard, we have the ability to flag addresses and pins in our permitting system. So even if this were somehow, the person that owns it currently wanted to come in and get a permit for it, and it didn't show up in a deed research, title search, because they already own it, our permit system would flag it and basically reference this case. So there's another set of safeguards as well.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Would the city be in charge of maintaining the easement?
They're not responsible for maintenance. They're only the grantees of the easement to modify or change the easement. Someone would have to come to the city.
You're not the owner.
Correct. They're not the owner of the property, only the grantees of the easement. Yep.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, and continuing the error, this is item D4, that's PBR 2023-15. It's Fraser Ridge. It's a 120-lot plain residential development in the RS9 zoning district. This is a 33.41 acre site located on the northwestern side of Old Blues Creek Road between Plata Drive and Brevard Street. Just to give a little context, this already had a preliminary approval attached to it, this area, and some additional area across the stream had a preliminary approval in 2007. The purpose of this request is to, a number of the changes could have been done at the staff level. However, they are also requesting to eliminate a northern street stub connection that was supposed to go to Largo Drive. The engineer submitted documentation and evidence showing why any street connection cannot meet the city infrastructure design standards. Our engineering folks took a look at that and agreed with that assessment. Therefore, that meets the requirements of the UDOs as far as proving why they cannot meet that connectivity requirement. I will also point out they are proposing a new street stub to the south for this undeveloped area. So that will, in this case, because they currently can't grade all the way to the site, we'll be providing a construction easement to alleviate any future connectivity requirements as a result of that. So that won't continue in the future. The site plan itself meets UDO requirements, has excellent internal connectivity, showing internal sidewalk access to all active open spaces, which are prominently located. Staff recommends approval of this request, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Motion.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Okay, I do have a question.
All right.
What evidence is actually generated? What kind of?
I mean, essentially, one of the issues here is the same issue we ran into the case on the edge of the Davidson County, Forsyth County line over in Clemens that we ran into, where on the subject property, they probably, the topo is of a level that the connection could be made. The issue is on what it's connecting into, and the fact that in order to construct the connection, they would have to get on the private lots, and the private lot owners are never going to grant an easement for someone to make a connection beside their house. So that's why Brian was pointing out the construction easements we have on the stub going to the south in this new development. They basically they basically submit the existing topo, how they would tie in, show where those tie lines are, show where it would go. In this case, they were going uphill, then back downhill. I mean, it's basically, they just have to show the engineer.
It's engineering data. It's not a narrative. It's it's engineering. It's basically just showing the grading plans, all that kind of stuff. okay.
So.
Thank you.
Additionally, they would have had to encroach in those two already constructed lots to be able to, more than likely, to continue that through-street connection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we'll now go back to the public hearing item, the zoning case B1 F1632, and there you are.
Sitting around the corner.
We'll hear from Nick.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is for zoning case F1632. The petitioners are Tia Jeanette Jackson and Lamika Lyles. It is a 3.04 acre site northeast of Old Hollow Road between Box Mountain Road and Phelps Drive. And the request is for special use rezoning from RS40 to RS20 special use. Here you can see that this site is located in GMA5. Old Hollow Road, which it would have access to, is the border between GMA4 and GMA5, but this property is in GMA5. As you can see on our location map, there On the northern, like I was just talking about, Old Hollow Road is the border between GMA4 and GMA5 in this part of the county. South of Old Hollow Road, you can see existing RS20, which does match GMA4 and the recommendations of GMA4 as an area. North of Old Hollow Road, you do see more RS30. Let me switch the pointer, sorry, 1 second. So you can see RS30 to the west and RS40 to the north, south, and east of the site, matching kind of the recommendations of GMA5. Let's see. So in an aerial image, you can see how the property is currently vacant and wooded with a stream cutting all the way across through here and some tributaries coming this way as well as this way. In the area plan, this does not have a specific recommendation as it is part of the rural study area. However, in general, in the rural study area, it does recommend large lot residential of over 5 acres per lot. And like I said, the border between the area plan to the south and this area to the north is that border between GMA4 and 5. GMA4 has area plans associated with it. GMA5, it is just general recommendations, not parcel-specific recommendations like an area plan would provide. In terms of site photos, this is from across the street looking at the property, again, vacant and wooded. This is looking north along Old Hollow Road. Subject property is to the right. This is looking south along Old Hollow Road. Subject property is to the left. And the next 2 photos are just the properties across the street and kind of just seeing what they are, what their character is like. This is a site plan for the property. You can see that they are proposing 15 lots, lot here, lots around these roads here, all the way over to here. First thing we're going to show, again, just emphasizing the difference between the different zoning districts. The red dotted lines are the lots that are below 30,000 square feet. RS30 is kind of the smallest that we generally recommend for GMA5. So the red one are lots that are below that standard, and the green lots are ones that are above that 30,000 square foot standard that we generally go for GMA5. The blue line from the access onto Old Hollow Road down to the southern terminus of the road kind of just shows the topographic challenges that this site also has. There's roughly a 50-foot drop from the access to the end of that cul-de-sac. So in summary, the request is inconsistent with the recommendations of the Northeast Rural Area Study and Legacy 2030. Legacy generally recommends preserving the rural character of GMA5 and recommends against intensifying residential zoning districts to allow for additional density. The request represents encroachment of higher intensity single-family zoning in GMA5 and could promote further land use intensification outside of the serviceable land area for public utilities. For these reasons, staff does recommend denial and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. I am more than happy to answer any questions that you all have.
If all the lots had been over 30,000 feet, that would have changed your recommendation? I shouldn't even ask that question because there's too many other variables, but that's a primary.
I'll defer to Chris for that.
That's a primary factor.
Yeah, I mean, again, it wouldn't be out of the question. There is some RS30 in the area on the north side. And again, I have some other thoughts. We can get to those later.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If this helps your thinking about that, if I did my math correctly, and I didn't count it by lot, but the average lot size when you add them all up divided by 15 is around 27,000 square feet.
So lose a lot and a half, and they could get to, yep. Okay.
Yeah. On the flip side, I mean, part of the rationale, part of the issue with this is, again, just kind of the unknown. It's the Pandora's box. You know, basically, we have tried to hold the line on intensification of zoning across that ridge line at this point. It's not necessarily that this is going to, you know, all of a sudden cause a huge influx of additional lots here. I mean, really, they're going to RS20 because of the way they have to put this road into, the way they have to put the connection on the Old Hollow Road, which then has some lots less than 20,000 square feet. If you look at the overall density, it's 13 acres. You can have 14 units, RS40 right now, and they're requesting to go to RS20 for 15 units. You could do an RS40 PRD and get 14 units today. Again, there are some trade-offs with that. And again, this is an area, it's not sewered, so again, you got to deal with septic and how you're going to cluster your septic fields and those kind of things. But you could do a cluster subdivision on here today, not have to rezone it, and get one less unit than what's being proposed. So that's kind of our, again, you're not getting a lot of additional things here and introducing a district in an area that is not called for because it's not sewerable.
And that would have been brought to the attention of the petitioner at some point.
It was. We had that discussion. I believe Paul can discuss it. I'm sure they have the reasons why they don't want to do it. Again, I'm just saying that, if you kind of look at the trade-offs, you're going from an RS40 to an RS20, you're not realizing a large lot yield, and you can essentially do it with under the PRD concept at the RS40 district.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
Can you go back out to the area map? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So we will go into public hearing on this. Again, each side would have 12 minutes to speak. It looks like there are 2 proponents and two opposition. So we will start with the proponents first. Again, as you make your way to the podium, please state your name, address, and zip code for the record. We have Paul Stimpson and also Matthew Jackson.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman and
Good evening,
board.
Mr. Stimpson.
Thank you for having us here. Thank you all for serving on the board and what you do. We appreciate it. I'm Paul Stimpson. I'm the regional leader with LaBella Associates. I'm a professional engineer. I'm here on behalf of Blackjack Lands, LLC, the developer, Ms. Tia Jackson. So thankful to be working with them. And this is the Blackjack Lands neighborhood. So this is a 15 home site single family neighborhood, and it's low density. And as you all may be aware, per state stormwater standards, anything 2 dwelling units per acre or less is considered low density, or 24% built upon area or imperviousness or less is considered low density. This particular neighborhood is only 1.15 home sites per acre, and it's also only 11.56% impervious. So that's a very, very low percentage. I want to point out we've done tree save area calculations, and by the requirement, we were required to have 50,803 square feet. And that's down at the stream buffers. Ms. Jackson paid a professional land surveyor to go out on the site, locate all the streams, so we can adequately show the 30 feet of stream buffer off the top of bank. So you basically have a 60-foot swath that's going to remain wooded and vegetated. This site basically gives double the tree save requirement. So we're at 96,647 square feet down in the stream buffer. And in addition, Ms. Jackson is willing to give a 10 feet of landscape easement around the entire perimeter of the property. And the HOA restrictive covenants documents will ensure that the existing vegetation remains all the way around the site, except at the entrance where there's site distance requirements. So I wanted to point that out, because we feel like that's being very considerate of the environment and very good conditions. Okay, a low-density stormwater permit will be obtained by NCDEQ. That's the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. And they're in Raleigh, in the State Stormwater Division. And they require minimization of storm pipes and also vegetated grass swales or vegetated conveyances to the maximum extent practical. So what that means is there won't be a whole lot of catch basins or drop inlets, only intermittent pipes at the gullies where runoff is naturally going, whether it be a short length of pipe to let the drainage go under the road and in a recorded private drainage easement. And then there's also O&M agreements, and those are operation and maintenance agreements. We have to do a lot of paperwork through the state, and these documents are recorded at the Register of Deeds, and it tells how often these grass channels are mowed, how high the grass can be, and it's going to be maintained. And the beauty of it is it treats the stormwater nicely. The pollutants are filtered and the grass swells, and it's not curb and gutter, so the flow is dispersed. It's not concentrated in curbs and gutters. The drainage easements will also be recorded on a plat by a professional land surveyor, and the stream buffers will be there in perpetuity. The developer will construct the water system to City of Winston-Salem standards and get an authorization to construct, an ATC. And we've touched base with the Winston-Salem Fire Department. He said the streets are adequate. We've got a nice fire truck turnaround that meets with their standard on the northeast end, and then a cul-de-sac on the northern end that's 48 feet in diameter, so very large for their very large fire trucks. And the reason it's not connected there is because the streams and the very steep topography right there. But we feel like it'll be a nice cul-de-sac for people to have nice home sites at the end of this cul-de-sac street. So the biggest challenge is gravity sanitary sewer. There's not sewer available. And by state law, you have to have a septic fields, and the developer's going to go through the proper channels and get the authorization to construct from the Forsyth County Health Department. And since the septic fields are required, it's not really feasible to do a typical PRD, because a PRD would require 20 feet of buffer all the way around the property, and then you have to go another 10 feet off that 20 feet. So you're already at 30 feet. And on a site like this, there's only so much good soil, if you will. You have to find soil that's got a good infiltration rate of about 0.3 gallons per day per square foot of infiltration trench. So that's what the challenge has been. The streets will be constructed to DOT standards with ribbon pavement without curb and gutters, with the channels as mentioned. And I wanted to point out too that we originally had the driveway closer to this eastern property line, and the DOT had some concerns about site distance. So I met in the field with the Assistant District Engineer, Mr. Thomas Scott, and he suggested that the entrance be moved to improve the site distance, and Ms. Jackson agreed to do that. And we had his wheel in the field. He and I walked it, and we rolled 500 feet each way, because the posted speed is 45 miles per hour. So you go 5 miles above that, and the design speed's 50 miles per hour. So the DOT says that entrance is adequate, and they dictated that it be at that location that we've shown right there. And the developer will have to get an NCDOT driveway permit. And as you know, they're very thorough. And if they issue a driveway permit, they're all about protecting the public safety. And the DOT won't issue a driveway permit unless it does that. And I want to point out that actually the average lot size in this development, if you look at the 15 lots on the lots, not including the streets, is 32,506 square feet. I've done the math twice on that, and that's what it comes to. So we feel like the developer has actually met the intent. If you look at the average lot size, which is above the RS 30, and she's trying to create quality home sites for the neighbors, and it's really needed. These home sites are needed in this area in Forsyth County. And we really appreciate your considering that, because that's the truth. So the streets have been designed to minimize impact to the environment. And Elijah Drive would also have been 20 feet wide, just like the cul-de-sac. We made that street as narrow as possible to have the least environmental impact as possible. But due to the length, the fire marshal said that street needed to be 26 feet wide. We've done that, but we're putting in the grass swales along that street. So even though the street's a little wider, no curbs, And the grass swales are going to treat the stormwater adequately, and it's going to function nicely for the environment. So in summary, this neighborhood is planned as a low-density development. It truly is. And the development will provide quality home sites, and the stream buffers will preserve the trees in perpetuity. As I've mentioned, we have to get a state stormwater permit, and those are very challenging to obtain. We do a lot of those. But it's very challenging to obtain because you have to record documents that ensure that the environment is going to be protected long term, And the developer is willing to record the 10 feet of landscape easement around the whole perimeter of the property because they're existing hardwoods. I walked the site. It's a nice wooded area. We want to preserve those big trees. We don't need to come back and plant 2-inch caliper trees if we have a 10-inch diameter oak or nice evergreens out there. And that's what Ms. Jackson is proposing to do, and that will be in the restrictive covenants of the HOA. So based on the merits of this neighborhood and these qualities, we really appreciate your time and your recommendation for approval of this special use zoning. We wanted to do this site plan and not just request a zoning because we really wanted you to see the challenges of the site and yet see how it's being preserved by the plan. So I really appreciate it, and if it's okay, at this time I'm going to have the developer or her representative come up and say a few words. So thank you.
Thank you. How much time is left? Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, about 3 minutes.
3 minutes, all right. If you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Jackson. My address is 4719 Box Mountain Road, which is right around the corner from the property. What else did you ask me?
Zip code.
27105.
That's it. Thank you.
As I said, my name is Matthew Jackson. I'm Tia Jackson's brother and also the co-owner of Blackjack Lands. I'm a local resident and basically a neighbor to the property in question. I own homes on Box Mountain and Wentworth Road. The Box Mountain address is less than a mile away from the land, and the Wentworth Road address is within 1.5 miles, 2 miles. I would just like to say, I'm gonna make this short, quick. I have a slip disc in my neck, and sitting here and standing here is extremely painful. I have the utmost faith in the project and its ability to meet or exceed the expectations in development. We don't plan on changing much of anything or taking away from the current conditions, tax value, or standard of living that the neighboring community has become familiar with. We only aim to add quality homes at comparative prices to those already in the area. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. If anyone else would like to speak. All right.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Tia Jackson. I also stay right there by the property, 4493 Tice Avenue,
Zip code.
27105.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. But yes, I'm not trying to change the neighborhood like that. I love that it's in the country. I want to keep it considered country. I'm probably going to build and live on it myself with my son. So I still want for it to be considered, spaced out, not so packed in. Like, that's what I love about it. So that's all I really have to say.
Thank you. How much time is left, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Chairman, about 30 seconds.
All right, 30 seconds left if anyone else would like to speak in support.
Just want to thank you again and really request that you consider the merits. And we're, again, over 32,000 square feet per lot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we do have two opponents in this case, Ann Voss and June Ames. If, again, state your name as you approach the podium, your address and your zip code for the record, and let us hear your case.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Voss. I live at 5818 Box Mountain, which is in the impact area of the 500 feet distance, 27105, sorry. Thank you. We are opposed to this development. We've heard a lot of conversation about comparing this to RS30, where the current zoning on it is RS40. As you can see from the current property lines on this, though I live in RS30, I have 3 acres. My neighbor has 1.5, another has 2 in these short diagonal properties there. Wayne Conley above me is 9 acres. Across the street is 30. And that's a 200-acre parcel just around the corner that you can see coming in just short of Mountain Brook. While we appreciate that by legal definition, the RS20 is low density, it is not comparable to what is currently in the neighborhood. And in speaking with the development engineer, it is my understanding that the offerings to be made for those home sites have been described as barn dominiums and container homes, both of which have interesting challenges in meeting building code in terms of fire safety and other codes. So I think that plan is somewhat ill-advised. We have a lot of homes in the area built in the 40s. We've got brick bungalows and older independently made homes, and don't feel that this is in concert with the neighborhood. And also, I was going to bring up the Northeast Area Plan and the GMA 4 versus 5 distinction, and we would really appreciate the county and your body keeping to that plan and keeping to the spirit of that rural zone in the GMA 5 and keeping these at larger lot size. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, about 8 minutes.
8 minutes remaining.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Ames, and I live at 1519 Old Hollow Road. Well, I can't reach it, but I own a 25-acre farm.
Your zip code, please.
Oh,
I'm
sorry. Everyone's forgetting that. 27105.
Thank you. Can you do the pointer if she's trying to, please?
Okay, thank you. Oh, this is better for me. I'm old school. So I own this property as well as this one, and this one. So I own a 25-acre farm. I emailed Nick this afternoon. I don't know if he forwarded you this, but I'm better if I read rather than try to look at you and talk. So anyway, so I have a vested interest in what happens to this property and the effect it will have on my community. I was also a real estate investor for over 20 years, so I fully understand what it takes to build homes and how our decisions can affect the real estate market, neighbors, the environment, and communities as a whole. I strongly oppose the zoning changes and mostly this proposed subdivision. And for the following reasons, I'll try to summarize. First thing is driver safety. The entrance and exit of this subdivision would be located in a very dangerous curve on Old Hollow Road. I live right there and drive this road every day. Mr. Stimpson, I think was his name, doesn't live here and he doesn't drive that road. So surely him standing out there with an engineer, they think it's okay, but I see this all the time. I have witnessed numerous serious accidents in that curve, and almost daily there are close calls there. I hear horns blowing, I myself driving, people are crossing, slamming brakes. It's just not a safe area. So increasing the traffic volume here and having cars turn in and out of the subdivision is not a good idea. As you see, there are no turn lanes being added or any other road safety improvements being made with the proposed plan. So the number of serious accidents would most certainly increase due to this. I don't know if I'm allowed to speak to this or not, property values. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but my thinking is we have enough low-income housing in the area, and we don't need another potential low-income subdivision here. There's a subdivision that has been unfinished for at least 10 years, and there are multiple unfinished homes within just a mile from this location. The subdivision, the developer, I'm sorry, is proposed, sorry, I've gotten tangled up. The subdivision that they are proposing gives no indication of what type of neighborhood they plan to build or what types of homes they plan to build. I was also told maybe barn-dominiums or tiny homes, which do not go with our area. I was only really told it would be single family, which to me leaves it wide open for anything. Given the sizes of the lots and the building envelope sizes on the proposed subdivision, I can't imagine that those homes would increase the value of property of our community. And it may end up being a rental community, who knows? Protecting our rural communities. I understand that the Beltway will bring growth to our rural communities, and I welcome it. However, I don't think this type of subdivision is what our community needs. I don't think we need to try to urbanize our rural areas so much. It feels like the developers are trying to build as many homes as they possibly can on this piece of land without regard to the environment or surrounding neighbors. Lot 15 in the proposed subdivision shows a home being built only 7 feet away from my property line, which goes against the 10-foot easement they were just speaking about. This home will also require a driveway across the creek. Furthermore, the main road for the subdivision will be right along the property line they share with one of our other neighbors, who isn't here this evening. A tremendous amount of trees will need to be removed to build this subdivision, which will undoubtedly negatively affect the ecosystem. The water quality and flooding potential. As you know, there's a creek that runs through this property, and it is essential for keeping stormwaters from flooding the surrounding roads and properties. I can tell you it drains it a lot. It goes through my property, and it is like just rapids going through there. It also provides clean drinking water to the abundance of diverse wildlife in the area. In the proposed subdivision, 11 of the 15 homes will be built on the creek, and 1 will have a driveway across it. At least 5 of those homes will have their septic drain fields on the opposite side of the creek from the home. It's my understanding then that means septic lines will have to be placed over, under, or through the creek. All of this will definitely put a strain on the ecosystem, and there's a high risk of the creek becoming blocked or polluted due to this subdivision. If either of those things happen, it would create serious consequences for this community. This same creek flows through my property, and I'm located upstream. If the creek becomes blocked, my property will be affected negatively by valuable pastures being flooded during and after storms. This in turn could affect the health of my livestock. If the creek becomes both polluted and blocked, the damage and hazards to my property and livestock could be catastrophic. And then lastly, I'm concerned about the developer's experience. I don't feel very confident in what has been presented to me. I don't agree with the proposed subdivision plan for the reasons I laid out, and I just don't feel confident that things will be done properly. Again, I strongly urge you and all the board members to vote no, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I have a question. So you mentioned this development potentially urbanizing this area. Then you also mentioned the potential for the construction of barn dominiums, and I'm trying to square in my mind an urban barn dominium. I don't know that I've ever seen one of those.
Well, if you
seems
look
it's
it
going to
up-
be one or the other.
Well, if you look it up, a barn dominium can really be anything. I looked it up myself because I didn't really know what it was.
Well, I mean, a house could be anything.
Right, but it can be from, you take a barn, an existing barn, which there is no existing barn, and you turn that into a home, right? Or a lot of them that I looked at, my research looks like workshops type of buildings with a facade on the front, like an entrance to make it look like a home. Now, I don't know if that's what they're planning to build. That's just what I heard. There's no indication of what type of homes will be built on here, but judging by the, like, see how small these building envelopes are. And since my property is right here, I can tell you I know what this topography is. You only have certain areas to build these houses on these lots, right? So it's like when I spoke to Mr. Simpson to ask him about this house right here being basically right on my property line, he said, well, we could probably move it to the middle. And I said, well maybe not because of the land. This creek is right there. It's pretty steep. Like if you're trying to walk down to the creek, it's not just a nice leisurely walk. You've got to be careful that you don't slip and fall. It's very steep. It's the same thing on my property. So it's not just as simple as, well, we'll just move this house over here, right? And the other thing is, this is the main road going in and out of the neighborhood, and my neighbors right here, their house is right here. They're gonna have traffic going in and out right there. So to me, it just doesn't seem to take into account the surrounding neighbors and how it will really affect them. And then again, my number one concern, I mean, I obviously don't like this, but safety. I mean, I have a daughter who's grown up on this road. She's 18 now and headed to college, but when she started driving, I warn her constantly about this corner in particular. And we are actually in between two pretty major, like really bad curves, whereas my property sits. So I can't tell you how many times I've run out to help people in accidents or had to call 911. It's just, it's hard for people to see. And, you know, people are on their phones and cars flip, all kinds of stuff. So this is my number one concern, that this is gonna cause safety issues. So.
And I certainly understand all your concerns. Would it potentially, theoretically, be helpful to you if you could see the proposed restrictive covenants for the subdivision as to building materials and that type of thing?
Mr. Chairman, that's somewhere we don't need to go.
Okay.
We don't enforce restrictive covenants, and that's something I'm going to get to after the public hearing's closed.
Yeah, and to make it clear, I'm not against growth. I welcome it. I want our area to grow. I just don't think this is what we need. I think the developer could come back with a different plan that could be more beneficial for our area than this.
I have a question. In the course of meeting the developer, was there a point in time when someone said that the houses would be low income?
No, no one said that. That's my assumption. However, they have stated this evening that they're going to build a lot like what's in the area. And we have a lot of low-income houses in the area, which is why I said we don't need more. So my concern is we don't know what's going to be built. So there was a low-income neighborhood house built down on Box Mountain Road not too long ago. And it looked really nice at first. I mean, I used to be a landlord. I've had properties from one end of the spectrum to the other. And the problem is if you don't take care of it, right? So this neighborhood I'm talking about on Box Mountain, it looked really nice. Well, now people are moved in and it's been a couple years. It's looking pretty run down already. And I mean, everybody knows it comes along with it. Yeah. So yeah, we haven't been told. That's the thing.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to know. We often have that come up, and I just had a question. Of course, for the sake of planning, we don't take into consideration low income or intended value.
Nor rental.
Rental.
I think we're getting ready to go down a slippery slope.
As well.
And so I think we need to.
But
I don't want to overstep bounds and talk about anything I'm not supposed to. It's just my concern since there's an unknown.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do at this moment is close the public hearing. Thank you so very kindly. Any discussion from the board?
Yeah, I just wanted planning director to give some background about what can be built, since there was concern about barn dominiums or, I don't know, shelters being converted to houses or whatever.
I don't think it's a single-family residence.
What?
I mean, I don't think we don't have design standards.
I'm not talking about design standards. I'm saying that this is a single-family residence on a lot, therefore it requires a certain level of building.
Well, to be for building permit.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it has to be under NC building code and it has to be permittable and it
yeah.
has to go pass through fire. Those are like normal. You're not going to get a building permit and it not be built to all of those standards. Those checks and balances happen. Our city and the county and planning department are very good at enforcing those rules and regulations.
And that was, for the record, that was my rationale for asking about the restrictive covenants. I recognize we don't enforce those, but this property could be developed without a homeowners association. It could be developed without restrictive covenants. There, and to Ms. McRae's point, there's a hierarchy of things in place to ensure that the construction that's going to take place there is going to be single-family residences.
Right.
I mean, to your point, you can't get a building permit to build a single-family resident if it doesn't meet the building code.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted it to be stated.
Right.
We know that.
Right.
I just wanted it to be stated. Fair. That's all.
Any other discussion?
I'd like to ask a question, if it's not too late to do so, of Mr. Stimson, concerning the matter of having to cross the creek to run septic lines. Can you shed any insight onto that?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. That's a great question. I've talked with a licensed soil scientist, and what happens in a case like that is ductile iron pipe with mechanical joints is used, and you have to be a certain depth up under the stream bed, at least 3 feet. So you have a stable pipe system, and the owner has a nice pump system at the house. And I spoke with the developer, and just an example of a barn dominium is a nice looking home that they're planning to do, just so you'll know, but the pump would be at the home site and the sewage would be pumped through that stable system under the stream, so that the stream is not impacted or impeded in any manner whatsoever.
And I assume those systems come with an alarm that automatically goes off if the pump goes out.
Yes, sir. That's true.
Do you dig them or do you bore them under the, I mean?
It can be bored under the stream, so you don't have to do any open trenching and even impact the stream. There's different methods, but that's a great question. It can be bored up under the stream. Dry bored, and then the 2-inch ductile iron, 3-inch ductile iron pipe in the annular space, and it can be grouted, so the stream's not impacted if needed.
In both the original and the replacement fields located across the streams, right? On the north side, north is up on this, isn't it?
Yes, sir, and the reason being is so the stream buffer can be preserved. It didn't leave a huge area for the home site, even though some of the lots are over 70,000 square feet. The good septic soils need to be 50 feet off the stream, so that's why it's shown that way. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. I appreciate the question, Mr. Stillman.
Thank you.
Does staff have any data on other, and I realize we're not bound by any kind of precedent here, but other instances where we've allowed this change from RS 40 to RS 20 in GMA 5? Are there? I can't recall one in my time on the board.
Either.
But yeah,
Question as well.
yeah, yeah.
If you, I mean, we did not do an exhaustive search that I'm aware of, but, you know, in your packet, in the staff report, there were 2 that have been proposed within the area, both of which were ultimately denied by the elected body. I believe the planning board may have recommended approval of one, denial of another. I can't remember, but I can't sit here and say definitively no.
It's rare, though.
It would be rare.
Right.
We're going to have to be rethinking, though, these interchanges on the belt line, because.
Well, right, and again, that's what I was going to say. Now, keep in mind, I mean, again, one of the things that we're looking at with Forward 2045, and the sewer basin study that Kirk and Laura Lee and Courtney and folks spoke to you about at your work session, are areas where the extension of public services makes sense in limited use on perhaps the GMA 5 side of that line, but it's not wholesale. And again, it's one of those things where it hasn't been done yet. We're not talking about doing public sewer in this case. We're talking about doing septic. If I can, I think I've answered that. If I could step back, I just want to unpack a few things on both sides of the equation to make sure that we're all thinking about this consistently. The one thing that I will say generally about everything is, of course, a denial here doesn't mean that this property can't be developed for a subdivision tomorrow. Right. So this isn't an all or nothing proposal. So I say that for everyone's benefit. The one thing I will say is the 10-foot undisturbed buffer hasn't been shown on the plan, and it hasn't been proffered as a condition on the conditions of approval. So at this point, any discussion related to a 10-foot undisturbed buffer around the perimeter is a moot point. It's not shown on the plan, so I don't want that to be a consideration behind the decision. It may be provided, but it's not accounted for on the plans or in the conditions. As far as the safety aspect of the driveway permit, that's an NCDOT issue and an NCDOT requirement. NCDOT cannot deny access to this piece of property for development. There are parameters or things that have to be done. There are improvements that have to be made to make sure that the location of the driveway meets the requirements, so they've got the proper sight distances in the direction for the speed of the road. All the things that Mr. Simpson alluded to is handled as part of the driveway permit. So again, standing here and saying that there, could be an issue, well, there could be. But again, those things are handled through the NCDOT driveway permit. The reason why that's even being discussed here is because it's a public hearing for a rezoning. If this were a subdivision, it would have been approved, and they would have gone and get their NCDOT driveway permit and meet the requirements that they have to meet as part of that. There was discussion related to property values and the value of the house and the type of the house and et cetera. I know we kind of covered that, but I do want to make sure, again, that's not a consideration here. Getting to the house, a barn dominium versus a stick-built house versus a modular house versus a house that's built out of straw, which you can do. You just have to meet the building code, and there are requirements in the building code that talk about what you have to do. If you're going to build it out of straw, it's got to be engineered. There are things you've got to do, but again, you can build a house out of anything as long as it meets the building code. It doesn't matter what you do. So, again, that's not a consideration for this rezoning item. The other thing, and we kind of touched on it, the water quality aspect, the aspect of the septic system, the drainage fields, it's been answered, it was asked, it was answered. But again, that's something else that's handled as a separate issue. They've already identified preliminary septic fields that would meet the requirements for the infiltration, but the permitting of those is a totally separate thing. It's handled, by the county under the state regulations. If a soil scientist seals a drawing that says it will work, the state and the local government, Forsyth County Environmental Health, has to accept that. But again, there are construction things that are required for the installation of those improvements, the grinder pump, the alarm system, going under the stream, all those things are handled through that permit process. So I don't want us to get too far into the intricacies of eventualities of what may happen. This is really a land use consideration. And again, we've given you what we think our recommendation is and the rationale behind that recommendation. And then, at the end of the day, you've heard the testimony that you've heard, and that's kind of where we need to kind of focus our energies. That was long, but I had written several notes I want to make sure I cover, because I want to make sure that things that were said that maybe some folks think we should be considered, and as part of this decision, we really can't consider. And with that, I'll be
Chris,
quiet.
would you go back to, you made some, can't read my notes, honestly. You talked about what they could and couldn't do as far as the PRD. And this is trying to circle us back just to the land use issue of how many houses they could have if it were a PRD.
Well, and again,
which they could do.
Under the existing zoning, the 13.04 acres, when you do the calculations, equals 14 lots under the existing zoning. They are proposing with this RS20 15 lots. So there's a net gain of 1 unit. And again, there are probably valid reasons why the PRD would not work, but from a pure density standpoint, the rezoning from RS40 to RS20 is netting 1. But again, because of the way they have to put the driveway in, those lots on both sides, there's no way to make them larger than that size. But again, you could do a PRD, but again, with a PRD, you're going to have to run perhaps an internal collection system that would then have a larger lift station that you then have to pump the effluent to a gang area of septic fields. So I mean, again, it's trade-offs. The PRD works great whenever you have sewer. Whenever you don't have sewer, there are these kind of considerations you have to think. I'm just giving you a pure answer from a potential yield using the PRD. You could get 14, and what they're asking for is 15. You can say, but you can even look at that explanation one of two ways. The RS20 request with 15 lots tied to a site-specific plan isn't that big of a deal because you're only getting one more than what you could have gotten under RS40. Or you could look at that, well, go back to the drawing board and do it RS40 PRD and don't rezone the property. Again, you could look at that you could look at that either way. Our concern is just the precedent of rezoning an area in GMA 5 to RS20. The net impact of the development is negligible whenever you look at 14 compared to 15 lots.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it were being proposed without it being special use with the plan, I think it would be an easy thing to say, it doesn't work. But to me, when you look at the actual impact, now it's got a lot of conditions and difficult build criteria on the site, it looks like. But just from strictly land use, and seeing it as not as big a precedent as just RS20 rezoning would be. I think it's hard to say we would not let someone do this on their property.
I just think that, to Clarence's earlier point, we probably are going to have to rethink some things because there is that ribbon that sort of runs between the Beltway, the northern side of the Beltway, and the southern side of GMA 5, at least in this part of the county. And we probably are going to have to look at that and what we allow there, but we haven't done that yet. And we've had a commitment to preserving GMA 5, and we're not geographically a big county, and we don't have a lot of GMA 5. And we may have less if we reconsider what GMA 5 really is. But until we do that from a more global perspective, I have a lot of concerns about sort of heading down that slippery slope because now we've done it. Next time there's going to be another reason why, from a topographic standpoint or some other reason, we need to do it. And I'm just not at a point where I'm willing to go out into GMA 5 and do that. That being said, Ms. Jackson, every developer develops something for the first time, and I have no doubt that you're intending to try to do something good with property that you own, which quite frankly is your right to do. And I would encourage you to keep working at this. I didn't hear anything that made me think that if this were not in GMA 5, it would not be a great project. So I encourage you to keep it up.
Well, I want to go back to something about extending that because I think in a lot of those cases we're looking at it as we're extending something that's going to make it easier for like we're going to extend sewer. well, we're not doing anything that's going to make it easier for someone else to connect to. If this were part of a project that was looking at extending sewer in an area that we knew, okay, now that, like we're building a school or something.
Right.
Now we know there's more sewer, now we know it's gonna add to more density. So I don't think it's as much of a threat to, now we're gonna do everything like that there, because we're not providing any other means to do it.
I agree, Brenda. I think this is we're gonna see a lot of these come up, frankly. This is kind of we've put an answer on a paper and we've kind of smudged it out. Like, this is the downs, like the up zone, down zone kind of situation buffer on this. And if we were extending sewer, I would have great concerns that we probably need a pause. And I would say, you're at a great time in the city because we're about to look at this and a lot of things are changing. I think this one, it is special, an RS20 in a special zone. It's going to take a lot of gumption to do it, and I'm a developer. So I would have a hard time, I would get a lot of questions, but that's neither here nor there. Kudos for the gumption to do this. I feel like we're not setting a precedent, even though it's a rezoning. I think this is a special case, and we're really just adding one. I do not think that it's not abiding by the neighborhood character. I think that you're preserving GMA 5. The intent is that they're bigger lots, they're spread out. It's gonna take, you know what I mean? This one to me is special. If it was multifamily, if it were connected lots, I would say I probably need to take my developer seat off and respect this GMA 5 line that we're holding. I don't think that this is threatening it. I think this is providing much needed housing in our area, a diverse amount of type of housing. That's what sustainable communities need to survive and thrive. And the reason I sit here and the reason why we all sit here is because we want Winston-Salem, Forsyth County to survive and thrive. And so, that's all I gotta say. I don't know.
Would anyone else have anything to say before someone would like to put a motion?
I'll make one final remark, which is to say, considering land use and land use impact, I feel like we're overthinking this. It's going to make the difference of one house on the very edge of GMA 4, right across the street. That's my final remark.
I think this is something we're going to deal with a lot going forward. Not only in the city, but we see now that it's moving out. And there were several things that were said that we can definitely address in the work session that I think we need to really think through, deliberate through, and have some spirited conversation surrounding the direction of Winston-Salem and the planning board's role in that direction. So does anyone else have anything to say before someone would like to make a motion?
I have a question to staff. So this is,
Mr. Simpson, we're done with you. Thank you.
May I ask
No, because the public hearing is closed.
so that I
I'm sorry.
can make the recommendation here for the comp plan. It's consistent with the UDO?
It's inconsistent.
It's consistent with the UDO, but it would be inconsistent with the comp plan.
Okay. So, all right. My roll. I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Ms. McRae. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lamb. All in favor, any further discussion on that inconsistency? All in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. That is unanimous.
I move that the planning board recommend approval of F 1632.
Second.
Motion by Ms. McRae, seconded by, I think I heard Mrs. Stillman. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approval, sign of aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign.
8-1.
7-1.
8-1.
8-1.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, 8-1.
Yeah, 8-1.
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman of the board, that brings us to, I've got my book closed because I've been looking at so many different things. I believe the last thing we have on here is staff report. And with that,
These interchange, because they need special.
the work session 2 weeks from today, Amy Crum will be the star of that show, and we will have an update on Forward 2045 and kind of where we are with that, what we've been doing, some of our outreach efforts. She'll give you some statistics related to our survey, the number of surveys taken, et cetera, who we've been speaking to, and we'll also have a number of dates for the month of October for our public meetings, and also some other outreach efforts we're going to have during the month of September and October. We might have a couple other miscellaneous items. Those haven't been fleshed out yet if we have them, but anyway, that will be 2 weeks from today. And for those that did not have, that have not had your headshot for the website, so we can have every planning board member on there. Again, we still want to get a group photo, but if you could try to be there early on, a few minutes early, 2 weeks from today, so we can get that picture taken, so we can get all those on our website, that would be great. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian for the September zoning case preview.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So it'll be about 9 items next month. It's a smattering of different public hearing items. We've got 2 rezoning requests, 1 conversion case, that's Brookberry Phase 9, where we'll be converting the zoning from county to city, 1 final development plan, 1 elected body special use permit, so that's why you'll be only looking at the site plan to make sure it meets UDO requirements, 1 preliminary subdivision withdrawal request, and 3 planning board reviews. So just a smattering of different requests.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for staff report.
All right.
If I could say one thing, I want staff and board members to know that yesterday morning at the Commercial Realtors Association monthly breakfast meeting, we received a wonderful presentation about Forward 2045 from Tiffany. Everyone there owes her a great big congratulations and thank you. She represented you extraordinarily well.
Thank you.
Again, before we close, Mr. Bryan, thank you for, if you're watching, thank you for your service to the board.
Here's to George.
I was imagining you here today, hearing your comments. Anything else for the good of the order?
We'll have our motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. Lamb. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you